Hey everybody, this is Jamie Cross for GameDevTouchPlus.com. I'm a graphic designer and an indie game developer, and I also teach game development using GameSalad at Udemy and Skillshare.com. In this fourth installment of the Building a Platformer game using GameSalad, we're going to finish off Level 2 completely by adding a couple movable platforms. We're going to add the player's death, add an explosion when the player dies, and set up the game to handle the player's death so it resets the game levels. We're also going to get a preview of Level 3 and start building some of the elements for Level 3. So let's get started. So let's set up the movable platform now that I was just talking about that would be right down here between these two pillars. What we want to do, we want to add a new actor that looks like this platform right here. So I'm going to drag that in there. I'm going to call it Platform Movable 1 because there's actually going to be a second one on this level as well. I'm going to turn its physics off because we don't need physics for this. We're going to handle the movement of this through an interpolate behavior instead of the regular movement. I do need to add a couple custom attributes, and these will look really familiar to you. They're attributes just like in the droid. The first one I'm going to add is a real attribute. I'm going to call that my min. Need to add another one of those, another real one. Call it my max. We're going to add one more, an integer. Call that my speed. And those are going to be set up just exactly like the mean droid. It's going to have a minimum and maximum distance it could travel to the right and left, and it's going to have a speed at which it travels. And we're going to use these to control that. So let's set that up right now. First thing I want to do is drag in a constrain attribute. And we're going to constrain one of the game level attributes we set up at the very beginning of this tutorial. Movable x1. We're going to constrain that to this actor's position x. I'm going to need to add a couple rules to finish this off. For the first rule, we're going to check the attribute platform position x, and if that's less than or equal to the attribute my min that we just set up minus 1. So if it's 1 pixel to the left of this my min, it's going to move back to the right. So it'll have reached its minimum position on the left, and it'll then move to the right. And to move it to the right, we need an interpolate behavior. So I'm going to drag in and interpolate. And we're going to interpolate its position x to its maximum distance to the right. And then the duration is essentially the speed that we just set up. So the duration, we want to set that up to my speed. So let me rename this to move right. And I'm going to copy this to make the move left behavior. So I'm going to rename this one move left. Now, when the attribute self-position x, we need to change this to greater than or equal to, and we need to change this. I'm going to delete all of this out of here. When it's greater than my max plus 1, we want to interpolate its position x to my min, and then we would leave the speed at the self my speed because we want it to move to the left at the same speed it moved to the right. So let's place this on screen and get it moving properly. I go down here. I'm going to drag this actor in. Let me scroll here and scroll over a little bit so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to drag that in place, and remember, just like we did the droid, I'm going to put it at its leftmost position, and then double click it, check its position. So I'm going to say that's 670. I can ignore what's after the decimal. So for its minimum position, I'm going to put 670. Let's see what its maximum position should be. I'm going to drag it to the right. I'm holding down Shift so it doesn't move up and down on screen. So let's see, the position on the right, we'll say 861. So its maximum is 861. And I'm going to set the speed. We'll start it at 3 and see if that seems too fast or too slow. So that'll move back and forth correctly, but the player won't know how to deal with it yet. So we need to add another behavior to this player so it understands what to do with a movable platform. So like in a lot of the steps before, I'm going to create a group here in the player. I'm going to drag it up here, again, just so we can see it. And all the behaviors to deal with movable platforms I'm going to keep within this group. So I want to add a rule to this new group. You can also add a rule from the list over here, so I'm just going to drag that in there. And I need to check for several conditions here. The first condition is to see if it's overlapping or colliding with this movable platform 1, the one we just set up. And also, if you're not touching any keys, that means if you've just moved the player onto the platform and he's sitting there and you're not pressing any buttons, we want the player to move with the platform. When the platform moves to the right, we want the player to move right. And when the platform moves left, we want the player to move left. And what would happen if I didn't set this rule up I'm setting up right now? The platform would move, but the player wouldn't. So the player would kind of just slide right off the platform. So in order for that not to happen, we need to check for these keys. So if the right key is up and if the left key is up and you're touching the platform, that means you're just sitting on it. You're not moving, you're not jumping, you're not doing anything, but you are sitting on the platform. And if you're sitting on the platform, we want you to stick to it. So let's make that happen. We need to change an attribute. We need to change the attribute player movable offset. And we set this up at the beginning when we first started setting up the player. So we need to change movable offset. We need to change that to, that expression is going to be, again, one of the game level attributes we set up at the beginning of the game. Movable x1 minus this player's position x. And now we need to also constrain an attribute. We need to constrain the player's position x to another expression. And that's going to be the game movable x1 minus the player movable offset. And these are going to keep the player stuck to the platform when the player moves, or when the platform moves left and right. So let's go test that out. And what you can do when you're play testing a game like this, so I don't have to run through all this and do all this stuff over and over again, I'm just going to drag the player down right by the platform. Put it right here, and then play test it now, and you'll start right there. And the platform is not moving properly. So let's check that out. I think what the problem is, I don't think we really need these -1 and +1. I had those in there from the earlier version, and those are not needed now. But what we do need to check, when you place your platform on screen, for example right there, for the first time you want to place it numerically at either exactly your minimum or maximum distance. Make sure it's at either, in this case, 670 or 861. And then it'll start correctly. We need to add this new platform to the solid tag so the player knows to land on it and treat it like a solid object. Now let's try that out. Let's get to level 2. We can see that the platform is now moving correctly. There, when I walk on it, I'm not pressing any keys, and he stays on it and walks across. Let me go back again. And you can see when I'm on the platform, you can move around on it and then get off. So that's working great. But I also did notice we hadn't set up the toxic waste death yet. When I jump in there, nothing happens. And what we want to happen, we want the player to die instantly if it comes in contact with this toxic waste. So that's what we'll set up next. To make the player die when it touches the toxic waste, we'll have to make a couple changes first in the player actor. And the changes we're going to make, the first one is going to be in this interact with the enemies group. So I'm just going to drag this up here so we can see it a little more clearly. When I drag it up, it opens automatically. So I'm going to close the touch a bad guy group that we had set up previously for whenever it touches a droid. And we're going to add another rule or group in here to this interact with enemies. Drag that in underneath the touch a bad guy. It could go above it. It doesn't matter. I'm going to call this toxic waste. And what we're going to do is when the player touches the toxic waste, right there, so when the player overlaps or collides with actor of type toxic waste, we're just going to trigger a couple events. The first event we're going to trigger is the sound of an explosion, because the player is going to die instantly. So I'm going to do play sound. And the sound we want to play is bang. I'm just going to alter the pitch of this a little bit to 0.6. And what that does, just like this volume slider, you can set the volume of each individual sound between 0 and 1, 0 being off and 1 being 100%. With the pitch, you can change that value and it will change the pitch of the sound. So you could use one bang sound and make it sound differently for different events by changing the pitch of it. And you can also adjust the pitch here in the slider and the volume here in the slider as well as numerically. Let me put this back to 0.6. Okay, so after we play the sound, I just want to basically trigger the player as being dead. So I'm going to change his health to 0. So I want to change the attribute, game, health to 0. So that will immediately kill the player. But when the health is 0, we have one more group of attributes to set up, or group of behaviors to set up, that will actually trigger the player's death. And we're going to use this new group of behaviors to always trigger the player's death. If the player hits a robot and its health finally drops to 0, he'll die. Certainly when he hits the toxic waste, he'll die. Later on in level 3, when we put in some laser guns, if the player is hit by enough lasers, his health will go to 0 and he'll die. And every time that happens, we're going to access this same group of behaviors to explode and kill the player. So that's what we're going to set up next. I'm going to drag this back down here. In order to set up this player dying explosion effect, we need to make a new actor first. We need to make an actual actor for the explosion. So I'm going to go back here to our actors window, make a new actor. I'm going to call that explosion. Let's go in and make some edits to this actor so it actually works. As always, the first thing I'm going to do is turn off all this stuff. All of the physics. And it's not going to be movable because it's just going to be a particle effect that gets triggered when this player dies. The player's actor will disappear and this particle effect actor will appear, which will be just an explosion of particles. So to make that happen, we need to drag in a timer behavior. And what this timer is going to do, I'm going to say for 1 second. And I want to run this to completion because I'm going to actually put 3 particle effects in here. But this timer is going to control the length of time that those particles are active on screen. It's only going to be there for 1 second. So the explosion is fairly quick, and then it will go away. So let's drag in our first particle behavior. Now when we set up the bubble effect or the bubble particle effect for the toxic waste, I went through all these tabs fairly clearly and fairly slowly, so hopefully you can understand how particle effects work in Game Salad. So instead of going through all that again for all of these tabs, and there's actually going to be 3 particle effects in here to make this explosion, I'm just going to kind of breeze through this. You'll get to see the numbers I'm putting in here, but I'm not going to explain in detail what each number does in each one of these input boxes because I've gone through that once. If you need a refresher on that, definitely check out the tutorial where we set up the bubbles for the particle effects. So for the number of particles, I'm going to put in 100. Startup time, I'm going to make that fairly quickly, 0.3 seconds. And then the lifetime of the particles is going to be 2 seconds. In the next tab over, I want them to fly out quickly. So I'm going to make the speed fast. And I want them to fly out in any direction around the player. So I'm going to use random, 0, and 360. So remember, this is going to be an angle of movement from the center of this actor. So it'll go out in any possible direction, 360 degrees from the center. For the size, I'm going to make them start out at 8. And I do want to change the size to 1 pixel over 1 second. The color, I'm going to make this first one yellow. Just going to drag that there. Not going to do any rotation. And for the image, we want to use that same particle image that we used for the bubbles in the toxic waste. I'm going to drag that right in there, drop it on that. Now to make the other 2 sets of particles, I'm just going to copy this, Option drag. And all we need to change at this point, I'm going to leave them all set up exactly identical. Just change the color of each one. In this second set, I'm going to make the color like a blue. And I do want this color to change over time. So I'm going to change it to white over 1 second. Let's go back and make that change in this first yellow version. There we go. I'm going to copy this to make our third version. Just change the color. Let's do this one purple. So that's going to be our explosion. When the player dies, this explosion is what's going to be triggered. So let's go back and make one more change to the player to actually trigger that explosion and make it happen when the player's health equals 0. To do that, we're going to need to create another rule. I'm going to put it up at the top for now again, just so we can see what's going on. In this new rule, we're going to check for the attribute game health. And when that equals 0, the player is going to die. So the first thing we want to do for that is spawn that new actor, that explosion actor. So I'm going to drag in a spawn actor. And we want to spawn the new explosion we just set up. That's all we have to do. We don't have to make any other edits to this. We do need to change an attribute. So I'm going to drag in a change attribute underneath the spawn actor behavior because we want the explosion to trigger first and actually show the explosion, and then while that's going, it'll do these couple other elements right under here. So there's the game player dead attribute we set up at the very beginning of this tutorial, and I want to set that to true. And then also we actually want to destroy this version of the player. So what we want to do is just drag a destroy behavior in underneath that change attribute, and that's it. So the explosion will spawn, and then the player actor will disappear. So let's test this and see if I explode and die if I jump into the lava. So I'm going to preview, jump to level 2, and in Game Salad you can do that. If I had 100 or 200 different scenes down here in my scenes browser, all you have to do is double click it while you're previewing your game. Let me turn that down. And while you're previewing your game, you'll jump right to that specific scene and start it. So that's pretty convenient. You don't have to play through your whole game to get from one scene or level to the next. So I'm going to jump in here and hopefully I die. I did die, and I'm sure you saw the explosion spawned out, but it spawned this white actor here. I forgot to set that to 0 alpha or 0 transparency. Let's go back and fix that. That's in the explosion actor. Because it technically is a white box. Technically it is a 100 pixel by 100 pixel white box right now. So I want to change that alpha to 0. Let's go back and try that again. Gonna jump in there. So now I die. You saw the explosion shoots out, and that's it. Obviously, you would want to respawn the level or go back to your home screen or whatever you would decide to do in your game. What we want to do here, that's where the player dead attribute is going to come into play that we just set up within the player here, where I set player dead to true. We're going to use that to know when to respawn the player and start the level or the game over again. So let's handle that scenario right now. To do that, I'm going to make another new actor. And you don't have to make a new actor for this. I like to make what I call a control actor. And this control actor, I always set up to handle those type of behind-the-scenes events. When the player dies, do you respawn the level? Do you spawn him at maybe a last save position? Something like that. So if there's background tasks to be handled, I like to control those in a special actor I call a control actor. So I'm going to make a new actor, and I'm literally going to call it control. And then this actor, it doesn't have any physics properties. I'm going to turn those all off. It's just going to sit on screen and watch for specific events to happen. And also under the color, I'm going to make it 0 because you don't need to see it. It's for the developer, not for the player. In this case, I'm going to create a rule. And I'm going to say when that attribute, game, player dead, when that is true, obviously that means the player is dead, so we have to do something. And what I want to do in this case is just to restart the entire game. You go under reset game. You could also reset the individual scene, but I want to reset the game. I'm going to drag that in there and we get reset game. Now to get this control actor to work right, it actually has to be on screen. So I'm going to drag that in here. I'm going to place that on our stage. I'm going to drag it in. Again, my personal working style, I like to place it in the lower left-hand corner of my stage. Certainly, when you're developing, you can put it where you want. Maybe you'll have a different home location. But when I put something here, I'll always know that that's where my control actor is if I have one. So because I made it transparent, you can't tell it's there as the player, but it's going to sit there and watch for that event. So let's try that out. There I am on level 2 already. So I'm going to jump in that toxic waste and I should explode and the game should reset. Now that happened super fast, so fast in fact we didn't even see the explosion. So we need to make one slight edit to this control actor. I want to drag a timer in there so it doesn't reset so quickly. I'm going to drag in a timer. I'm going to say after, we'll try 2 seconds. I'm going to run that to completion and then drag in this reset game attribute. And let's replay that. And now we should see the explosion and kind of wait for a second before the game resets. So there we go. We got to see the explosion, and then there was a slight pause, and then the game reset, which is exactly what we wanted to do. Before I forget, since we created that control actor, I will also need to add that control actor to this level 1. That control actor will need to be on every level or every scene of the game so it watches for the player's death. So before I forget about that, I'm going to drag that in there. And again, it's transparent, so you can't see it, but it's sitting there. And now that will exist on level 1 too, so if I do die here, then the player will explode and the game will reset just like it's supposed to. Now we've just about finished level 2. All we need to do is add another movable platform. Just like we added this platform down here by the toxic waste that we just finished off, we need to add one more movable platform up here at the very end of where level 2 is going to end. Here's the key, and we're going to add another movable platform right in this area. So after the player gets the key, he can jump up here, and then over here is the exit to level 2. So he'll have the key, open the door, hit this trigger that's already set up. So let's add this second and final movable platform to level 2, and then level 2 will be done, and we can move on to level 3. Now I already moved the player up here just for testing purposes, so after we add this platform I can just grab the key, jump on the platform, test it, and make sure the finishing the level works. So the first thing we'll need to do to add a second platform is actually copy this first platform over here in the actors. I'm going to hold down my Option key, make a copy of it. Just going to rename it, obviously, to movable platform number 2. We just need to make a couple edits to this. I'm going to double click it. Now most all of these behaviors are already set up because we made a copy of the first platform. It's already got the my min, my max, my speed, all of those things we set up for the first movable platform. It's got all the behaviors it needs to move left and right. So I'm going to close those. All we need to do here is make one change to this constrain attribute. Because we have this set up as our second movable platform, I just need to change this movable x1 to another attribute we already set up all the way back at the beginning of this tutorial to movable x2. So now it's going to keep track of this specific platform's x location in this attribute, movable x2. So if you did have a third and a fourth and a fifth movable platform, and these would all have to be in the same level or the same scene, I won't need to create a new movable platform, for example, for level 3 where we're going to have one. I'm just going to recycle one of these existing movable platforms for there. But if on one level you have 3 or 4 or 5 movable platforms, you would need to create more movable X3, X4, X5, for example, and keep track of each platform's X position in that game attribute. So that's all we need to do to this platform. In the player, we'll need to let the player watch for this new platform that we just set up as well. In this movable platforms group, click that open, and we have a rule set up for movable platform 1 already. So I'm going to rename that to platform 1. Now that we're going to have multiple platforms, I want to be able to keep track of them. So I'm going to copy that. And now we just need to make a couple little edits to this one as well. In the conditions, we want to make sure that the player is overlapping or colliding with movable platform 2, which we just set up. And then just a couple edits here. This game movable x1, we need to update that to be game movable x2 because it's platform 2. Same thing in this one. We need to update this game movable x1 to game movable x2. So again, if you had a third platform, you would copy this and just make those same changes. You would update these to x3, x3, and movable 3, assuming you named all your attributes in actors those names, of course. So I'm going to close those up. Now we actually need to add that platform to the game. So I'm going to drag this platform into the game. And the way I want to have this platform set up is it's never going to all the way reach the edge of the exit route. and it's never going to all the way reach the edge of where the player is going to be jumping from. So the player is going to have to time their jumps correctly from this platform to get on the moving platform, and then from the moving platform, while it's going left and right, to get to their exit route. So again, it's just adding some more challenge to the game. As you move through level 1 to the end of level 2, things get a little more difficult. So to make that work, I'm going to start the platform right about at this height. And then for its minimum, maximum, and speed, let's get that set up. I want its minimum placement to the left to be 1445, and its maximum to be 1620, and I'm going to set the speed of this up at 2. Now I got these numbers from playtesting, and I want to make its starting position exactly 1620 now that I moved it around. So let's test that out and see what happens. There you can see the moving platform comes on the screen from the right, moving left of course, and then goes back again. So let me grab the key and see if I can get on that platform. Oh, I don't have my double jump. Let me grab the double jump down here. There we go. Because I do have that set up to where you'll need your double jump to get on that platform for sure. Let's get back up there and give that a try now that I have my double jump. There, I can get on it, ride it across, and double jump up to the exit. Open the door, get out, and we move on to the shell of level 3 that we already have set up. Remember, I set up shells of level 2 and 3 only with the existing elements that we had already created in level 1. So that completes level 2. Everything is in there. Everything is working right. And what we'll do now is move on to level 3 and finish that up. And then we will also add a splash screen at the very end of this tutorial. In level 3, there's some really cool elements, I think. You saw them in the video overview of the game that we're creating. There is laser guns that you can set up to shoot in any direction at any speed. And there's also teleporters. So we're going to set both of those up now and just about finish this game off. Let's take a quick look at the empty shell of level 3 that's included in the downloads for this tutorial. When you download the files, as I've said before, there's a fully completed version of the game that has everything in and everything all done, all the behaviors, everything built in the levels. And then there's also that empty version. And this is what will be in the empty version when you download it. So this is level 3. You're going to start up here. And what we're going to do in this section of the tutorial, we're going to add a couple laser guns right about here that are shooting in an X fashion. So we're going to add those in there. In this shell, I've already put most everything that we've built in levels 1 and 2. So there's all the backgrounds, all the platforms. I've included the pickups already here. No changes have been made to these. It's all the behaviors that were in level 2 are exactly the same here. I've just placed the items on screen already. There's some toxic waste here. What we are going to add here, and we're going to add it as part of this tutorial right now, is another movable platform going between these two peaks over this toxic waste. And the reason we're going to add it now, instead of me putting it in the shell, is it's slightly different from the previous movable platforms, only in the fact that the previous movable platforms were only one graphic image, one block of the repeating pattern. This one is going to be 3. And I just want to show you, make sure you understand that these don't have to just be one block square. They can be long horizontal platforms as well. So I just wanted to show that and make sure you understand that. The player will have to move down here, can opt to pick up these treasures if they want to. And down here on this level, there's of course a health. And now there's going to be two robots moving at different speeds. And again, these are already set up. Let's take a look at one. It has the my min and my max in my speed. And note the speed of this one is 175. Let me go back to where that is. It's right up here. Take a look at this one. The speed of this one is 125. So those robots are going to move at different speeds from each other. So they'll be crossing and crisscrossing back and forth. And that'll be something a little bit new for the player to deal with, where you'll have to jump one, and there may be another one right on its heels. You'll have to jump that one. Perhaps, depending on the timing of everything, before the player reaches safety where they can jump up here, another one will be coming from behind the player, so they'll have to jump backwards and then jump over it again. So it adds some variety and adds a little bit, again, new challenge to level 3. What we're going to add here is a transporter that's going to teleport you when you land on it. It's going to teleport you from here to the other side of this wall right here, and then you can continue on with the level. And I'm doing that right next to each other as an introduction to the teleporter, so you can see exactly what happens and the player will understand when I land on this one, it's teleporting me to another, because later on in the level, there's going to be another teleporter where you don't see where you're going to get teleported to. So I want to make sure that the player understands what's happening first before they teleport to an unseen random location. So again, after they jump down here, we're going to add another one of those laser guns right here that's going to be kind of protecting this double jump. And the player is going to be required to get this double jump to get through this little obstacle right here. They're going to need the double jump to either jump from here onto this platform or from here onto that platform. And then right here is where that other teleporter is going to be. You land on it and you're going to teleport to a completely different location in this level. You can't see it from here. And where you're going to teleport to is all the way over here. I'm going to put the receiving teleporter right there. So basically you're teleporting to a brand new location, an unseen room in the level. So you'll teleport from here. And then there's some more toxic waste obstacles. You're going to have to jump onto these platforms over the toxic waste. There's a health in the middle. And the reason there's going to be a health in the middle is because right here is going to be another laser gun. It's originally going to be unseen by the player because it's so far away from this first platform. But the laser is going to be skimming over the top of these platforms. So you'll have to time your jumps over the laser and over the toxic waste. Just to be a little bit nice to the player, in case they get hit doing these jumps, I'm providing them with a health halfway through the obstacle. Like I said, the laser gun's going to be right there. And then this is approaching the end of the level. You'll have to jump up and out. There's a key on the way. And then up and out to here, where there's another robot patrolling this platform up here. And we're also going to add another laser gun right here shooting at the door. So it's going to be much more difficult to exit this level. You're going to have to time your jumps over the robot and unlocking the door in between laser shots before you can get out and finish and move to the next level. The first thing I want to do to make all that happen is add this moving platform right here. All we have to do for that, since basically it's already set up. A lot of the hard work is out of the way for all of these elements we just saw. All of the behaviors and coding is done. Occasionally we just have to make a little edit to it. And what we're going to have to do for this one is drag this platform right there. And I'm placing it on screen so the top of it is right at the same top level as the platforms you're going to be moving on and off to. So like I said, I want this to be 3 images wide. So I want to make sure that this is set up to tile properly. I'm going to double click that. And in the graphics settings, I want to set the horizontal wrap to tile. While we're doing that, I'm just going to do the same thing for movable platform 2, in case we ever want to tile it later for another level. So now that's set to tile as well. Now when I stretch this, I'm going to click it. Let me scroll over so it's centered. And just drag the size of it. And now it repeats itself. So you could have 3, you could have 4, you could make it really long and have a whole bunch of platforms. Whatever you want. I'm going to double check that numerically because I want it to be exactly 3 tiles wide. It's a little bit off visually, so it needs to be 192 pixels wide because 192 is 3 times 64. So now it's exactly 3 64 pixel tiles wide. Now what we need to do to make this work properly is see what its minimum and maximum locations are. So this is going to be the minimum because it's the left side. So let me double click that, check its position. I'm going to say 670. So my minimum becomes 670. Drag it to the right. Say right about there. Double click that. And I'm going to say its X position, we'll call that 862. I'm going to make that 862. And I want that to be moving at a speed of 3. So that platform is set up and working. It's good to go. Just as a test, I guess you can see I always like to test everything before I add too much to the game. So I'm just going to make sure that that's moving back and forth properly. And it doesn't seem like it is. And I'm sure the reason why is I need to update its starting position to exactly either 670 or 862, like I had mentioned previously. So I'm going to set that up to 862. It's easy to forget to do that. Let's preview that. Jump to level 3. And there it goes. It seems to be working fine now. So with that one little adjustment, everything's good to go. I'm going to stop this tutorial right here for now. In the 5th part of this tutorial coming up next, we're going to completely finish off level 3 by adding all of the laser guns. We're also going to add both of the teleporters, and at the very end of the 5th tutorial, we'll add a splash screen to completely finish off the game. So come back for that and let's get this finished up.